Can you help get Papa in?
Hi, everybody. I think there are probably more people who are getting on. I'm going to give it a minute. Okay, I think there's probably a few more people who are going to get on, but we can go ahead and get started. Was there anything left over? Any questions that anybody had from last week's Zoom or last week's class? No. Okay. And this week, I believe we are talking about let's see here. Sorry, I'm trying to open the syllabus at the same time that I'm trying to talk, which is for me like trying to talk and chew gum at the same time. Marriage, intermarriage, relationships, that is our basically week 6. Does that agree with what everybody else thought? Great. All right. So why don't we start with, does anybody have any questions that you would like to bring up to start? No?
One question I have out of sheer curiosity, and this is because I was engaged. I called off my wedding a year ago, but I was engaged within another faith. And I was marrying, it's when I was a practicing Catholic at the time, and I was marrying someone who was not a Catholic. And that was a journey, to say it nicely and to say it best. Is there any sort of, I know there's not an official position with Judaism saying a Jew must marry a Jew, but I would just even be curious to know what your thoughts are. Maybe it's within the different denominations, what their thoughts are on marrying someone who might not be of the Jewish faith, or, you know, and people might convert, but like if they might marry someone who's not of the Jewish faith and that person does not plan on converting. I'd just be curious to, because it was again, it was a journey that was a lot of head scratching and a lot of expletives thrown around when priests weren't listening. So.
Yeah, so definitely, I think most Jewish communities will encourage people to marry someone who's Jewish. Having said that, there's a very high intermarriage rate, but Jews are encouraged to marry people who are Jewish. In the non-Orthodox world, and particularly in the Reform and Reconstructionist movements, non-Jewish partners are fairly well accepted in the community. And I think for many people, it's how, if you're planning, whoops, I am so sorry, I have to take this call. It's about all the anti-Semitism that's
How's everyone doing? I can't deal with awkward
Okay.
silences on Zoom, y'all. I'm sorry. I'm that person.
I'm doing
Uh,
great. Particularly interested in today's episode. I'm hoping to get married this summer.
Yeah,
or
because
this year at
Congrats.
least.
you're engaged to a Jewish woman, right? If I'm remembering
Yes.
correctly.
Yes. Yes. And she
I'm
didn't
also
even
getting married later this year.
a Jewish person too.
Yes, my fiance is Jewish, and his mother actually converted when she was young before marrying his father. So I've had a lot of support from my fiance's family.
It's nice.
Are you getting married here in Bloomington?
Yes. I mean, we still don't even know when we're gonna get married. So I think this week I'm definitely gonna call a few places.
Okay, very
Yeah.
it's beautiful in the summer.
Yeah.
Are you getting married in Bloomington, Katie?
Yes, we are getting married at the Woolery Mill off Tap Road.
It's fabulous, that venue.
Yeah, we've looked around once and there's just so much space and they work really well around people's needs. How's everyone else doing?
Is anyone else ready for spring break, or is it just me? Okay.
Yeah, yes and no. I'm excited for the break, but I'm not excited for the semester to be that much done, and therefore I'm that much closer to potential unemployment. So, you know, it's a
I don't know. I feel like I've been ready for spring break since the second day of classes. Like, it's horrible to say. I love teaching, but I'm tired.
same.
I feel like we all need like 2 years off after the dumpster fire of this pandemic.
Yes,
Purim and St. Patrick's Day are on the same day this year.
they are. Yes, it's very exciting.
Party. That could be festive.
Literally very much party.
Literally, and imbibing, if you will.
Yes. Much imbibing will be done.
I just feel like Devin, like you being the wizard of the cocktail, like could come up with something crazy creative,
I should
bridging
work
St.
on
Patrick's
that.
Day and Purim together.
Oh. And I do have Irish ancestry, so you know it works.
And so does Atticus,
Wow.
apparently.
Nice. I'll work on that. I'll work on that.
I'm a Scot, not Irish, but have fun.
You know what? I feel like don't have one drop of Irish blood in me, but I feel like on St. Patrick's Day, everyone is truly Irish for that one day.
Except in Ireland, they don't actually like drink to celebrate St. Patrick's Day
Mhm.
because it's like actually like a very like sacred day. But
It is super
in
sacred.
America, yeah.
Sacred. Is everyone? Oh, Mabel wants to know if all of us is looking to convert. I'm looking to convert. I think most people are. Yeah.
I haven't actually started the process. I only asked Rabbi Brian about it, and he recommended I take this class.
Yeah. I think a lot of people take it to discern, but also some people already know. Like Devin and I both took classes with other congregations before doing this to kind of discern. And then both of us were like, let's go for this.
Does anyone want to share their story of why they decided to convert?
I decided I was always fascinated with Judaism, but I found out as an adult that I was Jewish, which creates quite the cognitive dissonance a little bit. And I
Sorry,
personally had
everybody,
always,
that was related to, that was.
oh, nothing. We were
related
just
to-
kibitzing. Mabel, we'll like connect
to the
later or
hate
something.
crime-
Let's talk more.
the hate speech and the hate crimes that have been going on here on campus. So I apologize, but I knew I had to take that. Anyways, I just realized I couldn't hear anybody because I had silenced it. Okay, we'll get this again. So anyway, I apologize. But Anyway, so you had asked a very good question, Ursula. I didn't get to finish responding. In terms of wanting people to marry Jewish, and I think for many people, if there are going to be children, the hope is that the children would be raised Jewish. And I know we've talked about, according to Jewish law, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. And in the Reform and the Reconstructionist world, if you're born of a Jewish parent and you're raised as a Jew, you're considered to be Jewish. So because we are such a minority and Judaism is as small as it is, and something in terms of being very important to carry Judaism on to family if you have, if you choose to have family. So I don't know if does that answer, Abby?
I suppose this connects a little to last week, but if you adopt kids, like, what's that process like? Is there an age where they're young enough that they don't need to convert to be Jewish? Are they Jewish by being adopted and then being raised within a Jewish family?
That's a great question. So technically, if you adopt a child, they can go through the mikveh, just have a mikveh, which is the ritual bath that all of you will go through if you choose to convert. And if they're young enough, they're not going to have a Beit Din or anything like that. They're just going to be go into the mikveh as a child, and then they would be considered Jewish. So basically, they would convert as a child. I guess if it's an older child, it might be a little bit different, but if it's a baby or a young child, then it would just be having them go into the mikveh. And if they're born of a Jewish parent, then they would be considered Jewish, by the way. That's a great question. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? No? All right, so let's just talk a little bit about Judaism, Jewish weddings, that kind of thing. Okay. So basically, what makes a Jewish wedding a legal wedding is that the person who is marrying, traditionally, the groom has to give the bride something of value, which is generally a plain gold band, in the presence of witnesses. And what constitutes the wedding or makes the wedding legal is saying the statement, with basically in English, it's with this ring you are consecrated to me according to the laws of Moses and Israel, and it's betabat, basically ending with Kedat Moshe Yisrael, Hare at Mekudeshet Li betabat zo Kedat betabat zo Kedat Moshe Yisrael. With this ring, you're consecrated to me according to the laws of Moses and Israel, and that has to be done in the presence of witnesses, and that's what makes a Jewish wedding legal. The other aspects of the Jewish wedding that you'll find is you'll have, so there are two parts traditionally, historically, to a Jewish wedding. It is the erusin, which is what we call the betrothal, and sorry, I'm not following myself well though. So the erusin and the nisuin, which would be the ceremony together, that's the kiddushin or the wedding. And those two parts, the Erusin and the Nisuin, have been combined into one ceremony today. So it's all one ceremony where that are separated by the reading of the Ketubah. The wedding would take place under a chuppah. If you go through, you can see these in the glossary terms. Does anybody know what a chuppah is? Anybody?
Could you repeat that? You broke
Oh,
up.
Sorry, does anybody know what a chuppah is? Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
Katie.
it's the canopy that the couple is married under. It has to have the shawl over the top and then open sides.
Perfect. And that what covers the top, and you're exactly 100% right. And what covers the top, it can vary from being a talus to being flowers to being something that's handmade. I'm just going to show you. Let me see. I'm trying to see if I can find a picture of a chuppah for those who might not have ever seen one. Let's see here. Let's see, here's one. I'm going to share my screen for a minute. And whoa, that was weird. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'll share my screen for a sec so you can see what a chuppah looks like. So that's one picture of a chuppah. It can look different depending on where, but what's important, exactly what Katie said, is this canopy over the top and that it's open on all four sides. And you stand under a chuppah in a traditional Jewish wedding, and you will have the bride and the groom together with the rabbi or the officiant or the partners together underneath the chuppah, and then you have the Erusin part of the ceremony, which are the betrothal blessings. Hold on one second, just have to get my keys. Just make sure to lock it when you're done. Thank you. The betrothal blessings, and then you'll sit the exchange, the giving of the ring. Traditionally, a Jewish wedding is the groom giving the bride the ring and saying, "Harayat mikudeshet li b'tabat zo kadat Moshe Yisrael." With this ring, you're consecrated to me according to the laws of Moses in Israel. Today, obviously, that may look very, very different. Many people will want a double ring ceremony with both partners giving each other a ring or something of value, both partners saying that same phrase, and sometimes one partner saying that phrase, the other partner saying something like "Ani l'dodi v'dodi li," "I'm my beloved's, my beloved is mine." You'll see a lot of variety with that part, but I would say in general, in the non-Orthodox world, it is much more common to have a double ring ceremony and not just a single ring ceremony. Then you will have the reading of the Ketubah, which, does anybody know what the Ketubah is? Anybody?
It's the marriage contract.
Yeah, the Jewish marriage contract, which will be signed by witnesses again. And historically, the Ketubah was essentially the groom is purchasing the bride for X number of zuzim in a very contractual, legalistic text in Aramaic, which was the language of the vernacular around after the time of the destruction of the temple. Today, people will either have that. There's a lot of variation in a ketubah, but it would have some will use that same traditional Aramaic legalistic language, but have a much more a much nicer English text. Some people will use a Hebrew text that's similar. Some will use a Hebrew text that speaks of what their vows are to each other. There's a lot of variation today within what the ketubah would look like. But the ketubah is an important piece of that Jewish marriage, and it will be signed prior to the actual marriage ceremony. But it's read, like I said, during the middle to separate out the two parts of the wedding, the Erusin and the Nisuin. And the Nisuin essentially then consists mostly of the Sheva Brachot, it's the second part of the wedding ceremony, and you have the reading of the Sheva Brachot, the 7 traditional wedding blessings, and then after that, thank you. And then after that, you would break a glass. Does anybody know what the breaking of the glass is all about? And that's sort of a trick question. But yes, Kate.
I think it symbolizes the destruction of the temple.
Yep. Yeah. So that's what we all say, is that that symbolizes the destruction of the temple, and that ends the marriage ceremony. There are people who say it may have originally been because the breaking of the glass may have scared off the evil spirits, which were more likely to be there during a happy time like a wedding. We don't really say that too much anymore. And also there are some people who might also interpret it as saying, just as a marriage is fragile, you have to be sure to keep it, what's the word, like keep it from shattering like this glass does. And again, but the traditional explanation it's giving is exactly as you said. It's to remember, even at the happiest of times, we have to remember one of the greatest tragedies in Jewish history, which was the destruction of the temple. Good. And I actually left off an important thing, which is Bedeckin Kala, which is the Bedeckin ceremony. Again, traditionally, what would happen is that the groom would put the veil over the bride's face, and it harkens back to the time of Rachel and Leah, the sisters, the sisters who Jacob thought he was marrying Rachel, and instead got Leah, got the wrong sister. So you look at the bride's face and you say that after you cover her face. Again, I think what we haven't said, which is that in the non-Orthodox world, most rabbis will officiate at both same gender marriages as well as those between man and woman. So a lot of these ceremonies have been adopted today to fit our world that we live in, our modern world, and more choices that we have and are willing, and we support. So any questions, things I forgot to say? Just looking and checking. Did I say Yichud is the time after the wedding ceremony, when the bride and groom have a few minutes together alone before going out to be with their guests? Traditionally, way back when, that was when the couple consummated the marriage, way back in the day. Anything I forgot to say? Any questions you have? No?
Is there any, and maybe this is specific to outside the Orthodox, or maybe it includes the Orthodox, is there any marriage prep that typically happens with a couple, or is that kind of to each their own rabbi? That might be if they're working with a rabbi or getting married at a synagogue, if there's anything that's recommended for couples to do before they get married.
Yeah, great question. So so for some rabbis, they will have a great deal of marriage prep. Others don't do anything. So it really depends on, it's not something that's required for us as rabbis to do, but a lot of us will do it. We'll have, and again, it varies what that will be depending on who the rabbi is in terms of the marriage prep. That's a great question. And also, did I say this? I don't know if I did it in response to your question, Ursula, also is so in the Reform movement, rabbis are allowed to perform intermarriages between a Jewish and a non-Jewish person. In the Reconstructionist world as well. The conservative movement, used to not allow their rabbis to perform intermarriages. I don't think they do. I don't think they can even now. And Orthodox rabbis will not perform an intermarriage. Now, if somebody converts to Judaism, they're no longer, they're no longer a convert, so they're Jewish and there's no question. But the conservative movement does not allow their rabbis to perform intermarriages unless that's changed recently. As far as I know, they do not allow it. Again, oh, go ahead, sorry.
But that's, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that even if you've converted outside of Orthodoxy, they still won't marry you, or they still won't officiate a wedding between the convert who is not converted with the Orthodoxy and
Well,
Jew.
the Orthodox world won't. The conservative movement will.
Yeah.
The Orthodox world will not, unless you're now. If you convert with an Orthodox rabbi, the Orthodox world will accept you as Jewish and will officiate at your wedding. The non-Orthodox world will pretty much accept the conversions of any non-Orthodox rabbi for the most part.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right.
Mhm.
I have a question. Is it frowned upon at all to convert after marriage?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I would say that there are, I think that if the question is, would somebody want you to convert before or after the marriage? I think it would be preferable for most rabbis that you convert before the marriage. However, it's also not, you shouldn't convert for marriage, in the sense that if you just want to convert because you're marrying somebody Jewish, but Judaism doesn't mean anything to you and you aren't really wanting to be Jewish, no rabbi is going to want you to convert, because we're not seeking converts. But if you're going to convert, then probably most rabbis would say, go ahead and do that before the wedding. But if you haven't, most non-Orthodox rabbis would certainly be very happy afterwards if you said, I'm still going to convert and I want to convert. And even though I didn't before. I know many people who have converted after they've married somebody Jewish because it wasn't the right time for them before, for whatever reasons. They weren't interested in Judaism. It wasn't something that they wanted to learn about, but yet as they become involved with a Jewish person and married to them, and maybe their kids are being raised Jewish, they become more and more interested and realize that that's something that they want. And then all, at least in the non-Orthodox world, all rabbis would welcome you and encourage you to convert if you wanted to.
Okay, no, I want to convert anyway. It's just a matter of schedule,
Right,
I don't think I have enough. I want to get married this year, and I don't know if I'll have enough time to convert.
Right, got it. Totally understand. Nicolette.
I just have a question. Okay, so let's say a person converts and the person had children before they converted, and then they had children after they converted too. So then the children after conversion are obviously Jewish, right? If it's a female person. How do you handle the children who were born before conversion in a similar way as you would handle adoption?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
And, and then the other sort of secret in Judaism that people won't tell you is if it's a non-Orthodox world, if you're in a non-Orthodox world and somebody tells you that they're Jewish, most people aren't questioning or asking. So let's say you had children before you had converted and you've raised them as Jewish and they consider themselves Jewish. probably no one's ever going to really realize that technically they aren't Jewish, even though they wouldn't be. So, I mean, I'm not telling you not to do that, because you should. I mean, it's a good idea to do that, because it could be at some point in their life, they'll realize it and they'll want that. But technically, not too many people are asking very many questions.
Yeah, so, but I think it would only really become like an emergent issue if you're like making aliyah or something, then you have to like prove that you're
Yes.
Jewish, and that's a whole other ballgame, but
Yeah, definitely. And if, the other time it can become an issue, and it becomes a problematic issue, is, let's say that two people who, one of the people converts or both convert to Judaism with a non-Orthodox rabbi, they decide that they have children, and the children have not converted with an Orthodox rabbi, but then let's say those kids grow up and decide they want to be Orthodox, then there will be a problem for those kids. They'll have to convert again. Even if they've gone through the mikveh, and even if they've been raised Jewish, because the Orthodox world won't accept the conversion.
they only accept one way, so
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering, so how do you determine if someone is converting like conservative or reform? Like, what does that mean to convert conservative or reform? Does it depend on what denomination your or what movement your rabbi falls under? Or how is that determined? Is it determined by the convert themselves? They just decide that they want to be conservative or reform?
That's a great question. So really, the conversion that you're going through, anybody who converts with Rabbi Brian or me, you're going through what we call a halakhic conversion. Our conversion is according to Jewish law. You're doing the Beit Din, which is the three rabbis, a rabbinic panel that you'll talk to, you'll talk with and will question you. And then you're going into the mikveh. And if it's a male, you'd have either a circumcision or a hatafat dam brit, which is a ritual drop of blood. If you are already circumcised. So anybody in the non-Orthodox, like, you're going through a conversion, you don't really convert reform conservative. You would then choose later if you want to be reform conservative, reconstructionist, post-denominational, whatever, but your conversion is a conversion according to Jewish law, even though the but knowing that the Orthodox world won't accept it anyways.
Okay, so it doesn't matter like how the rabbi labels themselves?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Now, there may be some rabbis out there that are conservative that might say to you, oh, did you convert with a conservative rabbi? If not, we're not going to accept it. I haven't heard of that ever happening. I don't think it happens, but it could in some crazy circumstance, but very unlikely to happen.
Well, I think it's also, if you're doing it the way that you just said with all the steps, that's different than there are some conversions where you don't have to do that. And that's not according to Jewish law. And so therefore that would be questions more than whether you've,
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. And you will have a conversion certificate that says that you've gone through the mikveh, if it's male, that you've had the hatafat dam brit or the circumcision, and that you've had mikveh. Did I say that already? Mikveh and Beit Din. Yeah. So you'll have your conversion certificate that you'll have. And we actually, oh my goodness, I can't speak today. The conversion certificate that we use is the same one that comes from the conservative movement in terms of the wording of it. We used to actually purchase them from the conservative movement. Now we've actually not designed our own, we've taken their language and used that, but it's computerized so that it's all going to be, rather than fill in the blanks, it's all going to be typed out nicely. Katie.
I have a question that kind of ties in with everything we've just been talking about. What would be the viewpoint on a woman who is pregnant when converting?
That it doesn't matter. I mean, her child, when it's born, if she's converted before the child's born, then that child will be Jewish because they're born of a Jewish mother. It's a great question. Yeah, and I've actually officiated at a conversion like that. And actually, even the case kind of that Nicolette that you implied of, which is that woman had, I think, one child already before she converted and had two more after she converted. So the one technically wasn't Jewish. She was pregnant with the second when she converted and had a third later. So yeah. But anyways, any other questions? Right. So let's, we've talked about marriage. We'll talk a little bit about, let me just make sure. I think I did. Yeah, I did get all the, ufruf we didn't talk about. Let me just grab that glossary term. Ufruf is is a ceremony or basically the bride and the groom, or the bride and the groom will be called to do the blessing for the readings of the Torah, the Shabbat before their wedding. And then often they'll throw candy at them and begin to celebrate ahead of time, like it sort of begins the weekend celebration of the wedding. And then we'll jump from there into divorce, which, we hopefully most marriages don't end in, but for those that do, what makes a Jewish divorce legal is that the man has to give his wife a get. That's the Hebrew word for the writ of divorce, is a get, as long as there is a ketubah from the first marriage. If there's no ketubah from the first marriage, then a get isn't really needed. But a lot of people might get that anyways. But like, let's say that your first marriage was to somebody who wasn't Jewish, then you wouldn't need a get. Or let's say for some crazy reason you had a first marriage and there never was a ketubah, which would probably be very unusual today, then you technically don't need a get. But basically people would, and what the traditional get is that the man basically sends the woman away, the woman gets the get, the man doesn't need a get. The woman is given a writ of divorce, a traditional Jewish writ of divorce that affirms that she, or basically says that she is no longer married to her partner. And the problem that can arise with that is that if a man refuses to give his wife a get, then technically she becomes what's called an agunah. And it should be a glossary word, but it's not. It's AG. I don't know why we didn't put it in there. We should have. AGUNAH. And that means that she is literally a chained woman, is what it really means. She can't marry anybody else. She can't have another Jewish wedding until she has a get. And that's something that can become very problematic if it's an abusive relationship or something like that, and the husband refuses to give a get. What the conservative movement has done to get around that is that they've got it's called the Lieberman clause that they put into their ketubah, and it basically says that if a husband refuses to give a get, then basically the Beit Din will prevent the problem of agunah, and she would be allowed to remarry, and she would have a religious divorce in the sense that the husband either would be compelled to give the get, or that she wouldn't needed anymore. It stipulates basically that it's as though she has a get if she needs it. And that's a clause that's signed in the Ketubah, that makes the get. It's part of the language of the Ketubah that's put into most Ketubah language right now, so that she doesn't become an aguna. In the Orthodox community especially, that can be a real problem, because essentially then this woman is stuck and can never be married again if her husband refuses to give her a get. Yes, Devin.
What happens for like non-cishet relationships?
So again, I think a lot of this, that would be in the non-Orthodox world. So again, it's not going to be presenting as a problem, because it's really within the Orthodox world that becoming an aguna is an issue. And you can also, a woman can also become an aguna. The other problem is, which is not really related to what we're talking about today, but only in the sense of, let's say that she is married to somebody and he like disappears in war, or something happens and he's not found, and she doesn't get a get, she becomes an aguna. But again, in the non-Orthodox world, this Lieberman clause makes it so that you're able to get married again. So.
And I'm assuming, Rabbi Sue,
Uh-huh.
there would also be outside of Israel, maybe in Israel, because it's a religious state, it might stop at the get. I'm not 100% sure. So would a civil divorce also be necessary with procuring a get?
Well, a civil divorce is needed in America, or you're not going to be considered divorced. So you have to do a civil divorce anyways, because just having a get is not, like in America, you wouldn't be considered divorced if you didn't have the civil divorce as well. Kate.
Do people ever get married like with a ketubah and Jewishly, but then not like legally, like with the country? Is that a thing?
So I have not heard of that, because basically those two parts of the ceremony, like when we perform marriages, we would have you get a state license and sign that at the wedding, usually at the same time that we sign the ketubah, and give you that. So it really wouldn't, I can't imagine a situation where it would be done where you wouldn't have a civil marriage at the same time as the Jewish marriage ceremony. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Any other questions, thoughts, things I didn't cover? Anybody?
There's a couple of vocab words that I'm not sure if you mentioned or not.
Which ones? Kiddushin is the wedding, which consists of the erusin and the nisuin. That's the Hebrew word for the marriage.
Okay.
Ufruf we talked about is the Shabbat before of being called to the Torah. Yichud is that private time together. Oh, I forgot Katan and Kala. The Katan is the groom and the Kala is the bride. That's the Hebrew word for bride and groom. Sheva brachot would be those traditional 7 wedding blessings that are recited at a wedding. Klipa, we talked about. Ketubah, we talked about. Harei at is the formula that we talked about. Harei at mikudeshet li. With this ring, you are consecrated to me according to the laws of Moses and Israel, breaking the glass get. And the Bedeckin is where we talked about that the groom would put the veil down over the bride's face to make sure he's quote unquote gotten the right bride, hearkening back to the time of Jacob getting the wrong bride, getting Rachel instead of Leah. Sorry, I said that backwards, getting Leah instead of Rachel. Um, Any other questions? See,
I have a question.
yes.
Is there I know you mentioned having Jewish witnesses at the wedding. Is there a number that's necessary?
Great question. Yes, you have to have 2 witnesses.
Okay.
And the witnesses, it's actually interesting. The witnesses, technically, now, not all ketubahs are the same. But basically it's the witnesses who sign the ketubah. They're in the traditional ketubah, the rabbi doesn't necessarily sign it. In a lot of modern ones they do, but in the traditional ketubah, it's only going to be your witnesses, your 2 witnesses that are signing it. Even that's what really makes the marriage legal, are those 2 witnesses.
And they are Jewish witnesses. They have to be.
They have to be Jewish, and they have to be above bar or bat mitzvah age. And even the bride and groom, or the brides or the grooms, don't have to sign for it to be legally binding. It's the witnesses that makes it legally binding. And there may not be a place. Some ketubahs have. The traditional ketubah probably didn't even have a place for the bridegroom and the rabbi to sign, although today a lot of times they do. Great. Any other questions? I see, Devin, you put an interesting case in the chat box.
Yeah, we had just talked about it some in my class this summer.
Oh, wow.
Of this Orthodox rabbi whose wives, there were wives who wanted to have gets, but their husbands wouldn't give them to the wives, and so he took on extra measures to try to.
Wow. Wow. That's wild. Wow. Huh. That's quite something. Huh. Interesting. Wow. All right. Any other questions anybody has? Otherwise, I think we're finished a little bit early today. All right. Well, great. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Are there any expectations for the groom and bride after, well, I guess husband and wife after the wedding in the congregation, in the synagogue? Do they perform? They light the Shabbat candles or anything like that? No, nothing.
Not unless they would want to, but it's not something that's like prescribed. So, yeah, it would be that Shabbat before that they might be called up to have a new frufen to do the blessings before and after the reading of a Torah portion.
Okay. And in the non-Orthodox world, there's really no, well, I guess also not conservative. There's no separation, I guess, or difference really between married men and non-married men.
That's actually a great question. So there are some people in there's some parts of the Orthodox world, a man doesn't wear a tallis, the prayer shawl, until after he's married. Mostly in the non-Orthodox world, a man, and then many women today also, would wear a tallis upon becoming a bar or bat mitzvah. But some people in some Orthodox communities don't have you do that till you're married. But that's the only thing that would change. Good question. Great. Good.
I had a question that was sort of unrelated, just about the journals. So what kind of things do you want us, or do you think that we should include in our journals?
So there are questions each week for you to answer that are in the journal. It's the last part of the syllabus each week. The last part says journal entry. And so that it would be those questions that we would recommend. But then if you have other thoughts, ideas, things you're thinking about, things that you want to make sure to talk with whichever one of us you meet with, myself or Rabbi Brian, I would say include them in your journal as well. It's a good question. Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And I will see you in a couple weeks. Take
Thank you.
care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.